Hello and welcome to episode 25 of Unpacking Articles. The article we're going to unpack today is called The Effects of Picture versus Translation Mediated Instruction on L2 Vocabulary Learning. And as you can expect from the title, this article tackles this question. Is it better to present new vocab with pictures or with translations? When we look at textbooks, for example, you see that sometimes the words are presented with pictures that are labeled, but then you have word list where you have the word and the corresponding translation. So is one method better than the other? Previous research on this topic has yielded very mixed results, and there seems to be an effect for age as well as proficiency level. With advanced learners, we don't see much of a difference in terms of one method being better than another method. But when it comes to novice level students, adults seem to do better when the words are presented with a translation as opposed to the picture, whereas children do better when the words are presented with pictures as opposed to translations. And then the authors of this article bring up another good point, which is the assessment part, not just the instruction, how the words are presented, but also how we are assessing learning. Are we asking them to write the word next to a picture, or are we asking them to write the word next to the translation? In general, we know that students do better when the form of assessment is the same as the form of instruction. And so in this particular study, they're trying to see if there are effects for different types of instruction, pictures or translations, on different assessment items, elicitation with pictures and elicitation with translations. In other words, is one type of instruction more robust because it is superior regardless of assessment type? Or do we see that one form of assessment is better than the other, regardless of the instructional treatment? The participants were 60 students that were in 7th grade. They were learning English in Turkey, and they had studied English for 4 years. The target words were 20 words in English that were unfamiliar to the students based on a pretest. Now, here's our first red flag, and that is that the authors did not share the list of words that they chose. All they said was that they referred to concrete objects. The treatment groups were one with pictures and one with translations, and they were pretty evenly distributed. During the instruction portion, the students saw these 20 words one by one, and then they also engaged in practice, which all they tell us is that it consisted of repetition of the words and also question and answer drills. Immediately after learning 10 words, the students took a post-test. So they had 2 immediate post-tests, 10 words, 10 words. And the students had to write the English word. The test used the same method as the learning session. So if the learning session was all about pictures, then the test was all about pictures and the students had to write the English word. If during instruction the students saw the translation of the words, not pictures, then in the immediate post-test they were giving the word in Turkish, their L1, and the students had to write the English equivalent. They had 2 delayed post-tests. One happened 1 week later, the other happened a month later. And they had to write the English word once again, but this time all 20 words at once in one test. The first delayed post-test followed the same method as the learning session, so pictures, pictures, translation, translation. But the second delayed post-test, the researchers wanted to see if there were any differences when the test items did not match the instruction items. And so on the second delayed post-test, they had pictures and translations for everyone. The scoring was very simple, 1 or 0, and spelling mistakes were accepted. So they still got credit, so to speak, if the word was close enough to the target word. What did they find? On the immediate and the first delayed post-test, picture-based instruction did better than translation-based instruction. And what the immediate and the first delay post-test had in common is that the assessment type was the same as the instruction type. Pictures, pictures, translation, translation. So it seems that when the assessment items are the same as instruction, there is an advantage for picture-based instruction. But let's take a look at the second delayed post-test, the one that they took a month later and the one where they had both translation and pictures for everyone. First, there were no differences between instructional groups. In other words, the advantage of the picture-based instruction disappeared. And actually, the translation-based group did better on the items where they had to provide a translation. And second, when they compared overall performance per item type, so performance on picture items versus performance on translation items, they found that everyone did better with pictures than with translations. And something else worth pointing out is that there was a sharp decline over time. They went from about an 80-90% score on the immediate to about a 30 to 40% score on the delayed, even those after only 1 week. This tells us that the effects were relatively short-lived, so we need to keep that in mind when drawing conclusions. And so let's draw some conclusions if we can. Can we? What's the bottom line? The perhaps frustrating bottom line is that there is not enough evidence to conclude that one method is unequivocally better or superior to the other method. It's all relative. It seems like it depends on the age, it depends on the assessment type, it depends on the type of instruction, it certainly depends on the words. And speaking of words, one of the limitations of the study that I mentioned before is precisely the lack of information about the words. We don't know, for example, if the words were unknown to the students in their L1. If students had no idea what the translation meant because the words were so obscure in their native language, that could have given an advantage to the pictures group. And one other limitation is the lack of clarity in the research design, which may have muddied the waters, so to speak. It's not clear, for example, why all the post-tests were not the same. Only the second delay post-test looked at differences in terms of test items, but that was a month later. So now we're mixing time and format. Despite these limitations, I do think that there are a couple of pedagogical implications, not just from this study, but taking everything into account. First, it's time to bust the myth of not using translations. This idea of avoiding the L1, the idea of keeping languages separated, to make connections direct between the target language and the concept. All of those ideas are not fully supported by evidence. As we saw, results are mixed. In some cases, translations do indeed help. Now, I'm not saying that translations by themselves are always the best way to go. All I'm saying is that we need to view translations as one more possibility, one more strategy. Pictures, gestures, translations, I think they all have a place when it comes to making content memorable. And there isn't a single strategy that will work for everyone all the time. And that is precisely the takeaway. All research studies have limitations and all strategies have limitations. That's why we cannot expect just one study to give us unequivocal answers, and we should not expect unequivocal success from just one strategy. That's just my take on it. As usual, I encourage you to read the original and draw your own conclusions. Thank you for tuning in, and until next time.